Hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Happy Friday, everybody. It's your time to shine. I'm your host, Christoff Weihman, America's favorite speaker empowerment coach and the creator and producer of the Ultimate Speaker Competition. I'm so excited. I have an amazing guest today who is becoming a very good friend as well. And this gentleman, his name is Joseph James. He is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. Thank you so much for your service, sir. He is an author of the upcoming book, Alpha Leadership, Leading the Alpha Within. He is a canine trainer. He is a speaker, an award-winning speaker, happens to be actually the grand prize winner of our recent Ultimate Speaker Competition in Phoenix, a father of 3. And this gentleman, Joseph, in the course of 22 days, tragically lost both his father and his wife. And he has turned his pain into purpose. He is a very powerful and impactful speaker. And it's just my pleasure and honor to welcome to the stream my friend, Joseph James. Woo! Welcome, Joseph. I'm so excited to have you here today. It's been a little while. You just got back from a whirlwind tour. You're always on the go. You've been speaking all over the country. And I'm just grateful to have you here today. And we finally found the time. So welcome.
Thank you, Christoff. It's truly an honor and a pleasure. I greatly appreciate the opportunity and glad we finally were able to nail down a time and get this. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit briefly. If you could just give us just real quick, short synopsis. Who's Joseph James? Where did you grow up? I know that, maybe tell us a little bit about what drew you to entering into the military and, just a quick little synopsis of your background.
Yeah, so Christoff, I was born and raised in Jacksonville, North Carolina, in a Marine Corps family, just right outside Marine Corps Base, Camp Lejeune. My dad spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, and it's we lived it. He was
It's in the blood. It's in the family.
It's in the family. He was a very strong disciplinarian, but the discipline didn't stop there. It went into abuse, and it was abusive towards my mom and then towards my siblings as well, not just verbally, but also physically, emotionally, so growing up in that, but at the same token, I was also being raised to be a leader from a very young age. And my dad was always pushing us. But the way he pushed us, I look back now and I can see things totally different than, of course, as a young child. As a young child, the viewpoint was nothing was ever good enough. I look now and it was more of, I want you to do better. I always want you to strive to be better, but growing up in that physical abuse, the verbal abuse, it took a toll. And by the time I got out of high school, I wanted to get away. Eventually did join the Marine Corps, not to follow in my dad's footsteps, but I thought that was a right opportunity for me. And I actually did it to help my parents out financially because I knew I was going to get a guaranteed paycheck. And again, just the beratement from my father of, you'll never make it, you're going to quit. Just, I was walking in those footsteps and didn't realize it until I made the announcement or I made the decision to go into the Marine Corps. And everything that my mom and my older sister were saying, you're going to be just like your dad, I now saw it full-fledged. And, fast forward my time out of the Marine Corps, my mom passed away when I was 27 years old, when I really wished it was my dad. I just didn't have the relationship with him. I still had some hatred towards him and some discontent and some unforgiveness. And it was just one of those things that, like, when you're close, I was close with my mom. And when she passed away, it was just like one of those, like, why couldn't it have been dad? Just why couldn't it have been,
wow.
Why do you got to take away the favorite person in my life? And, but fast forward 14 years, my dad died my best friend, but only to be preceded by my wife passing away 22 days later. And, I just there was a lot of things that transpired for the healing to take place between my siblings and my father, to be able to get to that point where all of us, I have a brother and two sisters, all of us said the same thing when my mom passed away. Why couldn't it have been dad? And all of us said the same thing when he died. He died our best friend. And there's a lot of healing that took place, and that's ultimately what, and I know we'll talk about this later. That's a lot about what the book is going to be about, is when we go through challenges and tribulations in life, it's common for us to look for outside help, therapists, friends, motivational speakers, online, how to get through this, how to get through that. And I did. But I came to realize, to the realization that everything that I needed was already deep inside of me. I had been getting prepared for 40 something years, or for 40 years, that when my wife and my dad passed away, I already knew what I needed to do, or I already had within me what to do. I just had to figure it out. I just had to pull it out. And that's what the Alpha Leader is about.
Now, how long were you in the service?
I spent right at a little less than 6 years altogether in the Marine Corps.
Okay. And thank you. Thank you for your service.
Yes, sir.
Respect and honor and appreciate you and your family for their service. And your father and your wife both died within 3 weeks of each other. How long ago was that?
So this January will be 4 years now.
4 years. And you have 3 children.
I have 3 children. My youngest will turn 5. So he had just turned 1 right after my dad passed and right before his mom passed.
And were these, was it sudden or expected for either, what do you want to talk about first? Your dad,
we can talk about my dad first. My dad had chronic illness, chronic COPD. He had smoked during his time in the Marine Corps. And even though he had stopped several years prior, his lungs were eaten up with Agent Orange. It was eaten up with, nicotine. And he just, he lived a good, strong life. He passed away at 74 years of age. And, 14 years after my mom passed away. So, but it was his time. His body had taken a toll on him. His health had taken a toll on him. And he fought through every living thing that he could. But I guess the coolest thing about the last year or so that my dad living is he really celebrated all his children. I was successful in my dog training business, and he would brag about me. He would brag about his 2 daughters. He would brag about his son. And even the times that we were together in the hospital, I remember this was a year before he passed away. We came in thinking that he was not going to make it out of the hospital. And this was in 2018 or 2017, I'm sorry. And every time a nurse came in, he would ask the nurse, "Hey, do you know so-and-so, or do you know what this is? Or do you know what that is? That my son over there, he's doing that, or my daughter over there." That's all he could do. That's all he could do. And it was just one of those moments that as a son, to hear your father brag about you.
Wow.
It was, I guess it was a way to go out.
Yeah.
And though he still lived another year, the year was still a phenomenal year. And I got to do things with my dad and talk to my dad and have the conversations with my dad that I had longed for as a child, but got them as an adult. Wow. And I was okay with that.
I can relate in some regard, some ways. My father was not abusive, but I was never close with my parents. And my dad died of cancer, colon cancer, at 62 years old. And my mom just turned 80. So he's been gone for 18 years. I was overseas. So I never really had an adult relationship with my father at all. And I'm grateful for you that you were able to have that experience. What was the process that took place, or who initiated it for you guys to start to I guess, mend those wounds and overcome those pains from the past?
When after my mom had passed away, and I can't remember how short after it was, but I only want to say it was a few weeks. I think all of us and when I say all of us, my siblings and my dad, we either went to the grave site shortly right after they buried my mom, or it was right when the headstone came in. I can't really remember, but that's when my dad apologized. That's when my dad took all four of us, it was just the five of us there, but he said, I apologize for being who I was and acting the way I did, and this was, I knew it was to be genuine because years prior to that, I had told my dad that I forgave him. I went up to him, we're sitting in church, and I just said, Dad, I want to let you know that I forgive you for the way that you treated Mom, the way you treated Michael and my two sisters, and myself. And he leaned back in the chair and he said, and this is what really caught me by surprise. He didn't say sorry. He said, that's what I thought I was supposed to be doing. And it really shook me because I'm like, how in the world would you even fathom to think that abuse? And listen, I'm all for discipline. I was okay with the discipline as a kid. Okay. And it's not the physical beatings that hurt. It was the verbal. It was the verbal words that hurt, that nothing was ever good enough. That's what really took the toll on me, even into my 40s. But I knew by hearing that answer at that time and still not understanding, and then hearing him say he was sorry when my mom passed away, I knew he was broken.
Wow.
And then we just, we were never at a point that we never talked.
Yeah.
But if I could avoid the conversation, or if the conversation was there, it would be a short conversation. Hey, Dad, I could really, the conversations a lot with my dad was me always seeking approval. I'm 24, 25 years old and asking Dad, is it okay if I get a loan for a car? Because I was always seeking my dad's approval, because for my dad, nothing was ever good enough. So I always wanted it to be, is this good enough? Am I making the right decision?
This idea, and I think it's not, maybe it's becoming more and more common, but most of the time when people think of forgiveness, it's usually in response to, like, somebody apologizes, repents, or asks for forgiveness, seeks forgiveness. But as believers, we know that there's this concept of extending forgiveness before it's even asked for or sought out. And that's what you did. And, you planted that seed that took root eventually years later. And, that's not an easy thing to do, because, when we offer the forgiveness, I think for most of us in the back of our mind, it's like, okay, I'm extending it. And we just would expect the person to say, yeah, you're right, and I'm sorry. But for them to just not acknowledge it is, wow.
And that was hard. I walked out of there crying because I expected, here's where I set myself up for failure. I expected my dad to say, you know what, son, you're right. I was wrong. And he didn't. And I immediately went to a gentleman. He happened to be at our church. He stayed in his RV, and he was an evangelist, same age as my dad, kind of same upbringing, in the Marine Corps. And I said that to him, and he said, Joseph, he said, you've got to put yourself in his shoes, that he did what was ultimately probably done to him, and he didn't know any better. And that really helped me understand my dad. But it wasn't until years later that I understood that the reason why I was so hurt leaving the conversation is because, you're right, when we do go up to somebody, if I go up and say, I'm sorry, I'm already in the right place to say sorry. If they say nothing, it doesn't matter because I'm the one apologizing. But when you go up and you tell somebody that you forgive them for what they did to you, it puts you in a different place, and it puts you in a place of vulnerability.
Very
because
much.
you're setting yourself up to be hurt again. And the way not to be hurt is walk in saying, you know what? The healing is going to start now because it's starting within me, of me saying, forgive you. And it's almost like you have to imagine you talking to a brick wall that's not going to talk back. Because if we walk in there with the expectation that they're going to say, oh, you know what, you're absolutely right. And if they don't, then we're going to walk away with more hurt, more resentment, and we're gonna get bitter, and then walk in even more unforgiveness.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a few things that play there. You know, it's an energetic, it's a releasing of that person, and it's a healing internally for yourself. But it's also about timing, right? Just because you came to the realization, just because I'm making this choice, that doesn't mean that it's on their timeline. Just because that's where I'm at in my stage of growth, right? And you know, I've heard you speak on stage a few times, and you know, you're certainly somebody who walks your talk, and you know, you're you know, having the military background, having the disciplinarian background, you know, as men, we all, you know, we're taught. You just mentioned you cried. You know, that's not something you're usually supposed to say on an interview. We're only 15 minutes in, right?
Right.
But there is strength in vulnerability. There is strength in not being just a hard shell on the outside. It doesn't mean we're supposed to be wimps. It doesn't, right? So maybe just give us a little bit of your insight on that. I mean, your book is called Alpha Leadership. You can't get any more, you know, but I saw you did a little video talking about what alpha leadership is, about it not being dominating, not being domineering, not being controlling, not being what most people think of when they say, oh yeah, I'm an alpha. Oh, you get 5 alphas in a room and, you know, there's going to be chaos or there's going to be a throwdown, but does there have to be? So just give us a little bit of, you know, Joseph Jamesism on that whole concept.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Alpha is not, for years, alpha was this, I'm the one in charge. I'm the one that has to be domineering or controlling. And it was almost in a societal way of how men were portrayed over women, until women started kind of coming out of their own shell and being more of the masculine in their feminine role. And what I mean by that in terms of leadership, okay, and taking over leadership or being put in leadership positions. And so that's where the alpha came from, right? You know, and probably dates back even further than that. But I am trying to put a new twist, so to say, on alpha, because we all have the ability to lead. Okay, whether you're a leader of a Fortune 500 company or your company of 4 or 5 people, you can't lead other people until you lead yourself. You just can't. You can't effectively. Okay, if you can, you get away with it for a little while, and then it's eventually going to catch up to you. But alpha is simply nothing more but you. The alpha being you over you, and that's it. If there's only one person in this world that I need to control, that's me. There's only one person in this world that I need to domineer or it's me, nobody else, you know, and it comes, the alpha part comes through that, you know, where we are learning through challenges, through life, through trauma, through pain, through lessons learned, through failure, through successes, that all the answers that we need in life are already deep within us. And so if we are the alpha over us, alpha leadership is just pulling out the leader that's already deep within you. And it came from when I lost my dad and wife. And of course, I'm now a widowed father, 3 kids. I had a 10 and 8 and a 1-year-old. I felt like I didn't know how to father. Even though with a 10-year-old daughter, I had 10 years experience, and I felt like I was starting all over from scratch. And I kid you not, I went 6 straight weekends. I was gone every weekend, traveling somewhere, whether it was with my dog training company, whether it was going to a motivational seminar, going to be with friends, something to find myself again. And that's kind of what I was doing. Is like I was setting out to find who I was. And after 6 weeks, I just realized I'm like, I didn't gain any ground. Nothing's changed.
Wow.
You know, and I continued it. I just wasn't traveling. And I came to the realization, people kept on asking me this question, like, Joseph, why do you continue to smile in the midst of so much grief? And I really didn't know how to answer that. I just kept on saying, yeah, it's God, it's God, it's God, it's God, it's God, which was true. But how do you say that to somebody that doesn't believe in God? So I had to dig deeper. I'm like, okay, I know it's God. God is sustaining me, but what is it that God is also showing me that I can help other people relate, that when they go through a challenge, not necessarily even the death of a loved one, but we're all going to face pain in life. Everybody is, you know? And I believe that pain is life's greatest teacher. It's also life's biggest crutch. It can hold us like glue, or it can launch us into destiny. And I'll say that again for you. I believe that pain is life's greatest teacher. It's also life's crutch. Because if I stick up, I get burned. Don't do that again. It's a great teacher. Okay? But it can also be the thing that holds us back, because I had well enough of a reason or excuse to not move forward in life. I lost my dad and my wife all at the same time. I would get a go card for being depressed. I think I would get a go card for doing nothing, for a period of time. I think it would be completely okay with that, and get the check in the box from everybody saying, you know what, Joseph, I don't blame you, man. I would have probably whooped me too. But the pain, what gets us stuck is not so much the pain, but the story we continue to tell ourselves through the pain.
Oops. And we lost him for a moment, little bit of internet challenge. Joseph will hopefully rejoin us in a moment. Such a powerful message there. Pain is our greatest teacher, but it can also be our greatest crutch. It can teach us what we need to learn in the adversity, in the challenge, in the struggle. But it also can be something that we hold on to as a reason to not move forward, a reason to not push through. And Joseph has just joined back again. Got knocked out. No worries. I was just reframing what you just said, or repeating. And it is true. There's a balance, right? Because when somebody has experienced something, whether it's any kind of loss, any kind of grief, it can be a divorce, it can be, getting fired from a job, it can anything. And everybody's pain and experience is relative to them. And there is a grieving time, and there is a time where you have to maybe take a pause and pull back. But you're right that it is acceptable, or we make it acceptable, that here it's X number of weeks or months or years later, well, this is what happened, this is what the experience was, and so I have every right to not push forward, to not push through, to give up, to just maintain at an average or a minimal level, just survive. People use this word all the time about, I'm just getting by, or I'm just surviving, or how are you doing? Well, I woke up on the right side of the ground today. I think that's this minimal mindset of, really, I'm grateful to be alive, but I'm not just grateful that I made another day, right? Yeah. I think that there should be so much more. When you speak on stage, you bring this message, and it is a very powerful and yet vulnerable message to share. Talk about like why do you speak on this? Why you already have a successful business as a dog trainer. Tell us a little bit about that, and then tell me why do you feel that you're called to speak? And you travel all over the country. You seek out opportunities seek you out. It would be easy to, just focus on your dog business, right?
Yeah, we do have a dog business here in New Orleans. We're in starting June will be the start of our 7th year, and we were 3 years into the business when my wife became pregnant, or eventually ended up passing away. And I wanted to give that up. I really did, and because of all the pain. And I had a friend ask me, he said, Josie said, "What are you going to do when the dust settles?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Start something new." And he's like, "Why don't you just do status quo until things the dust settles?" And I'm like, okay, you know what? I'll do that. But I didn't do just status quo. I kept growing because that's who I am. But in the midst of that, when my wife, she gave birth, and then it was right after 6 weeks after she gave birth to our 3rd child that cancer was discovered. Okay. Stage 4 colon cancer. And I felt in my heart, I knew right then and there that once I found out, I'm sitting in the hospital room, she's in the bed, and I just felt a quickening in my spirit to share our story. I didn't know how I was going to do it. And I just knew that's all I was supposed to do. And so I would go on Facebook Live, and because I wasn't on TikTok, Instagram, really, I wasn't doing all the short videos and reels and things like that. And so I would just I would do a live video, get my phone out, and I would share our story. I told the world what was going on with my wife, and I would be crying. There's times I would be laughing. There's times I was praying for my wife, praying for people. There was times I was asking people for help because I didn't know if I was on the way to the hospital to almost say goodbye to my wife, and so in that, by telling the story, I realized a couple things, and it wasn't until later, kind of referencing back to when people say, "How can you smile so much after losing your wife?" Is when I this is kind of how the speaking and coaching kind of evolved. When I was sharing everything live, it got to the point that I not only was just telling people about the story, but I began to shift the focus off of me and onto other people. And I begin to declare what was going to be happening. I declared that God was going to heal my wife, and I declared that other people's healing. And it really ended up turning into, I'd give people an update, but then I would turn it into prayer.
Wow.
And we started off with 40 days of prayer. And I declared, I says, guys, watch, God is going to heal my wife in 40 days. At the end of 40 days, she's going to be healed. There is significant, and the reason why I picked 40 days, there is a significance to 40 in the Bible.
Sure, absolutely.
Not to kind of get too deep into it, but Beelzebub is the name of a fly. The devil is considered the Lord of the flies. The lifespan of certain flies is 40 days.
Wow.
Okay. And so I knew that to break this off, we were going to have to fight for 40 days. Farmers will spray for 40 straight days over crops to kill certain flies. If they miss a day, the flies will hatch eggs and everything, the life cycle starts all over again. Well, here comes day 10, day 20, day 30, day 35, 38, 39, day 40, and there's still no healing. Day 41, and I'm still praying. Day 45, day 55, day 60, day 90, and I am still proclaiming and believing that God was going to heal my wife. And, in all that, it really shifted the focus off of me and our journey onto other people, because it wasn't just about a prayer for my wife. It was, if I saw you pop on as you're watching my Facebook Live, and I would start praying for Christoff right then and there. I would have people messaging me, can you pray for this? Can you pray for that? Can you pray for this? I would have people messaging me saying, you don't realize what you've done, but my son, who was addicted to drugs, came across your live feeds and has now been set free from drugs.
Wow.
I heard people I got messages from husbands and wives saying, our marriage was in shambles, on the brink of divorce, and we came across your video, and the love that you shared for your wife gave us a refound reason. And that wasn't me, that was God.
Yeah.
You know, and I knew my own therapy kind of came through sharing that. And I didn't realize until later on that after my wife passed away, in the night she passed away, I gained my why. I found out my why. And I'll share that here in a little bit. But the reason why I share the story and can be so vulnerable about it, because vulnerability brings healing to me.
Yeah.
But my transparency brings healing to you. We
Say it
live in
again.
a world.
Say that again.
Vulnerability. When I share my story, I'm being vulnerable. It brings healing to me. When I share my story, it brings healing to me. I am being vulnerable. I'm laying out all the cards. Vulnerability brings healing to me. Transparency, my transparency, brings healing to you. And the reason why I believe that is, number one, is it happened to me. When I begin to share my story, it was like a therapy session. I get to talk, I get to vent, I get to do whatever that I want. And it was me being vulnerable. But we live in a day and age, Christoff, and everybody that's listening, that there are so much fake people out there. How to make 7 million in 7 days, how to grow a 7-figure business in 7 days, how to do this, how to do that. There's so much garbage out there. You turn on the news and it's just nothing but lies, and it's just nothing but just filth out there. People are looking for somebody that's just willing to share what they are going through. The
real life
of realness, of real life. And that brings healing to other people, because what it allows then is they can sit there and say, that dude's for real. And if he's going through this stuff, I've gone through some of that same similar stuff too. And if he's going through it and is being healed, then so can they.
Absolutely.
And that's why I was able to smile, because I didn't realize until later on that the videos was my own. It was my time to grieve. Mm-hmm. And I would tell people, take 15 minutes to grieve. The reason why I said 15 minutes, because that's about roughly how long the Facebook Live videos were. Some of them were longer, 15, 20 minutes. But what I had to do is get on live. I would cry. I would tell my story. And then when I got off of it, I would walk back into my house, and I had to be the strong individual. I didn't cry in front of my wife. Not that it didn't ever happen, because it did. But I had to be the strength for 3 children and the strength for a lady that at any time could have given up and wanted to give up. And so by that, it allowed me, what I tell people, when you grieve in 15-minute increments. Wipe your tears, go throughout the day, even if it only lasts for 1 minute.
Yeah.
But by building the increments of 15 minutes, the 15 minutes then becomes 30 minutes throughout the day. Then it becomes an hour. Then it becomes 4 hours. Because when we cry, when we grieve throughout the day, it's kind of like the misty, rainy weather that never goes away, right? And you just feel like, oh man, I just want to stay in bed all day long. It makes your whole day somber. It just really does, And besides, there's other ways to change that. I always thank God when it's that weather, so it flips my mind script, in my mind. But we all know that feeling. And crying over a loved one or over a circumstance, the longer we cry, the more somber we feel. the more somber we feel, the more darkness that feels like it's over us, that we can get into deep depression and a lot of different things. But I didn't realize what I was doing until later on, when people kept on asking me, Joseph, why are you still smiling? And I finally sat down, I'm like, why am I smiling? And I just started to go through all the things that I was doing that changed my life to continue to move forward.
Wow. Now, I want to talk more about this vulnerability when I share my story. So you were sharing in the moment, right? You were sharing while it was happening. Now this is 4 years later. So when you stand, because I want to clarify something for speakers, for people who are speakers, because when you stand on stage and you are speaking to an audience, different than a Facebook Live when you are sharing in the moment of what's happening. You don't, like, there's a vulnerability you can share, but it's not meant to be a therapy session for you on stage, correct? Would you agree with that?
That's correct. Yeah, 100%.
Because
100% is, you know, to really answer that question is, I think personally for me, is I had to understand my why. Why am I doing this? You know, 2 whys for me. Why did my wife pass away? Okay. Why do I do what I do? And to me, they're hand in hand for me. Okay. The night my wife passed away, and I'll kind of explain this, is I was going through all our social media, all our friends messaging us, sending in their condolences. And I was in my wife's Facebook page, and I'm going through messages, and I run across a video. And it was a video of a pastor preaching. It was the last 4 minutes of a sermon that somebody had sent me 7 months prior to the night my wife was going to pass away. Okay. And I watched this video and I'm like, oh my God, babe, that's why you're going through this cancer. So you can relate, so you can touch the other people, you know? And I don't even know, I make the joke, like, I don't even know if my wife watched it. Okay. But I found it again that night that she is going to pass away. Okay. And this is what the video was about. In Hebrews chapter 4, verses 15, it says, for we have not a high priest who can't be touched with the feeling of our infirmities and was tempted in all ways. And what that means is, the reason why we go through pain, the reason why we go through the painful process, is we can't touch what we cannot feel. If you look in the Bible, Jesus was moved with compassion every time he went to heal somebody. He felt what they were going through. And though Jesus was tempted in every way, just like we are, he was tempted, and then also took on a sinner's death, according to the Romans, okay, and was crucified. All right. But he took on death's sting. Okay. So he knows what we're going through in every aspect. And when I heard that, I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, this is why my wife is passing away. Not for her. It was for me.
Wow.
I was the one that was going to share the story, not her.
Wow. Wow. That's so powerful and so profound. And it's true, you know, yeah, it helps people who are called to speak. Somebody, you know, a peer, Jenny DeBolt, who was with us at Ultimate Speaker Competition. And in her life, during the course of 10 or 12 years, she had 5 close family members die by suicide. And when she was in my coaching program, we were talking, and she said one day, she said, you know, Christoff, what? I just asked God, like, why can't I just be a normal person like you? She very successful in her business, successful in her, you know, she's confident in her family, and she's a powerful woman, but she has this calling to speak. And she said, well, why can't I just live a normal life? And I said, well, because you know you and I and others, you're not normal. You know, there's a calling, and it doesn't mean that a person doesn't have to be in ministry. I was in ministry in the past. I was a missionary. But if we are using our gifts, I say using to our highest calling is to use our gifts in service to others, and the world is waiting for us to heed the call. And that's what it's about. And that's why speaking and then also writing it down and putting it into a book is so powerful. Speaking so that we can be on stage so many people can hear, but putting it into a book because there are people that will pick up that book that will never ever see you, that will never ever hear your voice, but they will have it in hand, you know, and it can cross the miles even more so than speaking can. I want to talk about the power of connection. You and I met a year ago this month. I think it was almost a year and a handful of days this weekend. And I don't know, are you coming to Vegas?
No,
not this time. I want to give a shout out to Bill Walsh and Power Team. You and I met December last year at Ultimate Wealth Camp, and we connected. And I didn't actually hear you speak, but I felt something when we said hello. We had short conversation, I think at the networking event, and I just felt like there's something special about you, and I had the feeling that we are meant to do something, and I didn't know what or how or why or when. And we've stayed connected on social media, but our paths did not cross at other events yet. But I had seen you doing different things, and I think we kind of followed each other. And then you put a post about somebody else who is another connection. And I have a book here called The Power of One More by a gentleman named Ed Milet. Some of you may know who that is. I'm going to let Joseph talk about that in a moment. But you put a very powerful post on Facebook, and it was at that time what you shared that I said, you know what? I need to invite you to this event, to Ultimate Speaker Competition. We had never talked about it, I think, except maybe the very first time we met back a year ago. But I felt in my heart you were meant to be there. And then all the connections that were launched as a result of that. So maybe you want to take a couple seconds to talk about that whole experience with Ed Milet, which led you and me to really connect.
Yeah. So, kind of goes back to, and again, thank you, Bill Walsh, for the connection, because if it wasn't for his event and me serving with Michael Silvers and the Mentor Studio, and of course the Power Team, I would have not been at the event. And so we met there, and then, I knew that I wanted to speak. I knew that I had a story. And so I just started really going after everything that I could to learn more about speaking. And I grew up in church. I grew up preaching. I've been in 30 something different nations, and all of them I have, or most all of them I have been on the platform, even up to 80,000 people in Bogota, Colombia.
Wow.
So, and this is before Facebook. This is before people thought about the iPhone wasn't even out yet, so this is back in 2007, 8 timeframe, right before the iPhone was released. But, I really took it serious. I'm like, I know I had a message. And when I felt in my spirit that I was to share our journey, I knew when my wife passed away, I knew the journey wasn't over. I knew it was just getting started. But I didn't know how to formulate certain talks. And so I started going to different events. I ran across at a Bill Walsh event, I emceed, and there was a guy there that we made a pretty decent connection there, but didn't really connect big time. And I started following him on social media. I eventually spoke at one of his events. And then him and his wife became my marketing and branding coach. And while they're coaching me in different things, he was invited by one of his mentors to this event that a mastermind at somebody's house was going to have Ed Milet, Andy Frisella, Sean Whalen, Brad Lee. It was going to have those guys there speaking. And it was a pretty penny, And so I went, and in my mind, I'm like, man, if I can get an autograph or get a picture, I'll be doing really good. And of course, one of the first announcements they said is no fanboying, no autographs, no selfies or anything else like that. So I'm like, well, okay, that scratches.
that was my plan. This is what, come on.
But I always look for things that I can find a commonality with somebody to talk to them, especially if they are, let's say, a celebrity of high stature that everybody can do everything for them, but they don't need anything from them. Okay. Ed Milet being one of them. Okay. Everybody comes to Ed Milet, say, hey, I can do all these things for you. And he's like, I can do that myself. So what do you end up saying to the individual to gain their attention? And as he was talking about the transitional character. And the transitional character, and he talks about this in his book, is somebody like ourselves that grew up in an abusive home and was so influenced by abuse, maybe alcoholism, maybe, sex addictions, whatever the case is, that we could follow in those same footsteps. Statistically, Ed Milet should be an alcoholic because his dad was, and his granddad was, okay? Statistically, I should be an abuser, okay? Verbally and physically. Why? Because my dad was, my grandpa was, and who knows? So statistically, that's what we should have been. But at some point in time in our life, we made the decision not to be. And that is a transitional character. And when he's talking about that, I'm sitting, it's in a room, it's in somebody's living room. So they got a U-shaped couch. I am sitting dead center. I always find myself to be dead center. Bill Walsh says, when you go, always go VIP. So I'm like, everybody's got the same chance. I'm sitting right there in the middle. That's how I also got on stage with Tony Robbins. I sat right in the middle. And Ed, I'm crying. Ed's talking about this, and Ed keeps looking at me. And he keeps looking at me, and he's making eye contact with me. And I'm just tears rolling down my eyes. And he finishes. Everybody breaks. We're all leaving. We're all, everybody's drinking and smoking cigars and eating and hanging out by the campfire. And I see him outside at the campfire. And he's talking to somebody that I had already met. And so I just walked up to be like, hey, I kind of know this guy. So I'll act like I'm in the conversation. And Ed is talking to somebody, and he turns and he sees me and he says, hey, I'm Ed Milet. And I says, I'm Joseph James. And this is what captured his attention. I says, Ed, our stories are extremely similar, except for my dad wasn't an alcoholic. And he's like, whoa. And then immediately, for me, the anointing took over. And I just said, in the book of Hebrews 4:15, it says, for we have not a high priest. And I just began to share. And Ed is just like doing that. Ed is captivated. Okay? Because probably not that he hadn't heard a story like mine before. I'm sure he had. But he's sitting there and he's saying, Joseph, he says, the anointing's all over you.
Wow.
And he says, we do have similar stories. He says, how are you getting through it? And I'm like, just like you, man, I'm that transitional character, and I just begin to relate. And for roughly 35, 40 minutes, Ed and I talked one-on-one and had a crowd of people listening to us around a campfire in the front yard in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Wow.
And that's how that happened, And then, of course, I share the story about that. And because I didn't know it was going to happen, I had no idea. And luckily, I was able to get some pictures of a side shot of my face and facing him, and that's my proof, and I've got a little bit of video of it. And you can't hear that much of it because there's so much background noise, but it was very instrumental to me because he spoke some things into my life. And, when he said that about Joseph, I see the anointing on you. It's just at that time, it's just something I needed to hear, Wow. And I'm like, you know what, that man right there, as much as he is flooded by other people, that he took the time. It cost $100,000 for 1 hour of Ed's time. and I got 40 to 45 minutes of it. That's how much
amazing.
he charges to coach and speak one-on-one with people is $100,000.
And
I would
you shared this whole story on Facebook, and it was either, I think it was then or the next day, I messaged you and I said, hey, you know, I resonated with your story, and I didn't know of that. I know of him, but I didn't know much about him. But I have his book now.
Yeah.
And I reached out to you, and then you said, heck yes. It turned out that you were going to be in Phoenix where we were holding Ultimate Speaker competition. So I want to talk about, so it's the power of connection, and one thing leads to another. And with our event, I always say that it's about three things. It's about connection, competition, and collaboration. The competition takes place and lasts during the time when you're on stage during that day. But the connection starts from the beginning, and the collaboration connection continue on beyond and beyond. And from that, well, first of all, we're going to talk about what happened just this past weekend. But before that, I want to talk about the conversation that you and I had on the night of our VIP experience at the hotel restaurant. We were sitting beside each other, and we were talking about affirmations. We were talking about declaring. And what's very interesting is, you know, talking about coming from an abusive background, and that it was the verbal and emotional, even more powerful and more traumatic than the physical. You have shifted that so much that a big part of your message is the power of words on the positive side, right?
Yeah.
So talk about the conversation that you and I had and what the result was from that.
Yeah. So, you know, this is several months prior to my wife passing away. So I think it's about roughly October, November of 2018. I am scrolling through Facebook like everybody does, and I keep on seeing these sponsored ads of this guy talking. And it's all motivational. It's all, you know, hoopla and stuff like that. And I'm like, man, I just can't get past this guy's raspy voice. And he's probably really good at sponsored ads. And so I just kind of like, man, but you know, when you think it, all of a sudden it starts popping up everywhere on your social media, right? You know, and it's just day after day, I keep on seeing this guy. And, you know, fast forward a few months, my wife passes away, and my brother calls me up. And I'll never forget where I'm at. I'm sitting in a rental car in a parking lot at a business in Canada. I was doing a business evaluation on another dog training company that did not take my services, and they no longer exist. Sorry. So he calls me up and he said, Joseph, he says, we want to take our businesses to the next level. And I think I found the seminar or the workshop to do it. And I says, well, who is it? And he mentioned this guy. And I'm like, no, I can't do it. He's got this raspy voice, and he probably just started speaking. Okay. Now this is 2019, March of 2019. Okay.
Yeah. He was just getting started then.
He was just getting started. Yeah. It was Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins.
And to my living under the rock experience, I didn't realize that Tony Robbins was Tony Robbins of 40 years. Tony Robbins. He had been doing it for 40 years. So he wasn't just starting. He wasn't just good at paying sponsored ads. This is what he had been doing for the majority of his life. And I told my brother, I said, no, I can't do it. And he's like, trust me, man, I'm going to send you a video. I just want you to watch the video. And I watched the video, and I'm sitting there crying. And of course, I made the commitment to do it. It was to go to his business mastery program. And as I'm sitting in the car and I'm listening to the video, I said these words. And I said, I am going to speak on stage with Tony Robbins. That was March of 2019. All right. Well, we weren't going to even see him until I think the end of July of 2019. Okay. So a couple more months. But he happened to have a smaller event that somebody else was putting on that was going to be in Atlanta in June. My brother lives in Atlanta. So I called my brother up and I says, hey, Michael, look, there's this 2-day little deal. And let's just go to it. It's $1,500. Let's get VIP. Let's sit up front, you know. And we did. First day, we were walking into the hotel elevator. I had not said a word to anybody of the words that I spoke out loud in the car, but just to myself. And I said to my brother, I says, Michael, mark my words. I am going to speak on stage with Tony Robbins. 7 hours later, needless did I know that Tony Robbins was going to pull me out of the stage and have me speak for 7 minutes to 7,000 people. Wow. And it was all on the power of I am. The affirmation that I spoke over myself that I am, and then whatever followed it. I am going to do this. And of course, that's going to be in the book, and just the power of the words I am. It has the ability to be able to speak life or death. It all depends on what follows.
And you also I am'd becoming the first place winner, our grand prize champion at Ultimate Speaker Competition.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I had said to you at the dinner table also, is like, I am going to win this, you know, and of course, other people had said the same thing too, which they had all the entitlement to say so. They had every reason to, you know, but I kind of said mine quietly to you. I just knew it in me, you know, but I had to also walk in humility at the same time, because I had never been in a speaking competition before. And there were some amazing people. I felt like on day one, everybody was holding back. Day two, they just let it out.
Yeah. All of a sudden. Yeah. Where did these people come from? Let me put this in the chat for a second, or on the boom. I can't read it without my glasses. UltimateSpeakerCompetition.com, friends, UltimateSpeakerCompetition.com. And, you know, we've been doing this we started 3 years ago in December. So less than 3 years, because our last event was October this year. And every time we've done it, now 9 different times, 5 different locations around the country, we've had nearly 150 speakers that have spent what started out as a one-day event, now the 2.5 days together with us. Every time, there's at least one person who says, I'm coming to win it. I'm coming to win it. They usually say it on the Zoom calls. They usually say it, you know, a lot of different ways. To my knowledge, none of them have ever won, because it's a different attitude and it's a different energy. And not to say that anybody should not, and that should be www. not comma. I think everybody knows that. But there is something to be said, not something to be said. It is true. What we put after the words I am, and it's when we speak ill of ourselves or others. And my wife says, you know, our self-talk, she teaches her nurses, don't ever say anything to yourself you wouldn't say to a 3-year-old child. Oh, I'm so stupid. Ah, damn, I'm dumb. Would you say to your 3-year-old niece, oh, you're dumb. You're stupid. Oh, I suck. I'm terrible. And it's the words that we put in it. And you actually shared one of your 3 messages was exactly that. And I don't know if that was your final. Was it your final?
No, the final was, what would I do if I was on the deathbed? Yeah.
Yes.
The I am was the very first one I did.
Yeah.
The 2 most powerful words on earth are I am. That was my first speech.
Yeah. And now, as a result, going back to this whole thought of connections, and it's not just about connections. I want to kind of drive this home. Everybody has connections, right? Everybody meets people.
Yeah.
But it's, what do you do with it? What do you do to follow up, to make the connection become something? Because I see people that come to our event, they experience it, they say, this was wonderful, thank you, and we may not hear or see of them again, and that's perfect, and that's fine. But then there are others that see, oh, we're making these introductions or these doors of opportunity, that there's these other things that you could do or be involved in or whatever. And one is, connecting with Dr. Smiley, Ken Roshan, our publishing partner from Perfect Publishing. And then Dr. Michelle Maras, who has, with Ken Roshan, created Amplifluence. And I'm excited, grateful, happy, proud, and a little bit jealous about what transpired this past, was it Sunday? I think it was Sunday
This past
evening.
Sunday.
Tell us about this.
So like you said, the connection, there's just certain people that you connect with, but it like anything else, it takes work. You've got to cultivate the relationship. And we all know connection doesn't have to be told. You don't have to be told you made a connection with somebody. You just know it in your heart and you feel it. And when you feel that and you feel like it's good and that it can go somewhere, then start to cultivate that. And, I cultivated it while I was there. And one way I cultivated it, and this was not planned at all, is when Dr. Ken was sharing about his son writing a book, he had mentioned about his son being $75 away from being the top salesperson for Boy Scouts in the state of Maryland. And so I'm like, I always carry $100 bill on me, always. I've got one in my pocket right now because emergency money, you just never know. And when he said $75, I'm like, I'm sewing right into that, and because of that, even though it wasn't a planned thing, it just did something in Ken's heart to be like, there's something special about this guy. There's something that I want to be a part of. And it took off from there. And then of course, Dr. Michelle Mirage, she was there hearing me speak. We just connected from the very get-go. I saw her dancing and just singing, and I'm like, I got to be a part of that energy, and then of course, with me talking to Dr. Kenmore, just the three of us really gelled, and we just continue to cultivate the relationship where with Ken, not only being a celebrity photographer, but also being a publishing partner, he talked to me about my story and about my book or a book, and talked to Dr. Michelle about it. And we're sitting at dinner and we're discussing it. And I was never turned off from writing a book. I just didn't know what route to go when it came to searching for people to write it. Because one of the gentlemen that I used to travel and that was an evangelist I used to travel with, he's written over 42 books at the time. One of them was sold over 100 million copies, Wow. So I've been around it, sure. But I didn't know what to do. And the more they talked about it, I'm like, you know what? Number one is I want to do business with people that I know, like, and trust. Kind of get that from Bill Walsh. But I also want to do business with people that I have a relationship with. And I was building that. I was cultivating that connection that was going to be a relationship, and long story short is we came up with the idea. I already had the name, and we put things together, a book cover together, and we launched the start of the book tour. And the start of it, the launch was in Times Square, New York City, on the big giant jumbotrons, right smack dab in the middle of it, called Alpha Leadership. I've got what the cover looks like right here. Okay. And it's got a dog plus myself or my face on there. And it's leading the alpha within, Alpha Leadership, leading the alpha within. And the reason why I have the dog on there is because, yes, I own a dog training business, but just like we need to be the alpha, dogs are alphas over other dogs, or can be over a pack. We have to be the alpha. They have to be the alpha over themselves first. And then we have to be the alpha over ourselves, because we can't lead other people if we're not leading ourselves. Wow. Not every dog is the alpha. Not every dog is fit to lead a pack. Okay. Yeah. People will say they're alpha over the pack, but really they're alpha over themselves, which leads to them leading other dogs, for us leading other people. And so that's why we have on there both the dog and myself, my beautiful face, and called Alpha Leadership.
I love it. And congratulations. We had actually, as a part of our Ultimate Speaker competition, there were, I believe, 5 or 6 of our authors, including, yes. If you're watching, if you're on audio, obviously you can't hear these book covers, but we have the Ultimate Speaker collaboration book. David Chemetsky had his book cover up there. Sally Wurr Ann Luddington was there as well. Dr. Michelle Maras, 2 of her books, Ken Smiley, Dr. Rashan. And these, talking about the connections, to me, this is the joy of opening up doors of opportunity and seeing other people then taking that and amplifying. It's a word that Ken uses and I've adopted as well. Everything that we do is about empowering speakers and authors and entrepreneurs to share their greatness and then to amplify, what they're doing in the world. We've been here for over an hour. It's amazing how fast it's gone by. I have so many more things I would love to talk with you about. And so we're going to invite you back another time. But I think this is good. Our listeners and viewers can only consume content for so long. But I would like to just invite you to last words, Joseph, that you would like to share.
I share what I live, and that's ultimately, one is tell your story. Everybody has one, and it's bigger than just you. It's for the world. And I know that people can be extremely scared in telling their story because they may not think that somebody else has gone through it. But I'll promise you, somebody else has already gone through this, almost the same exact situation that you've gone through. But I'm going to rephrase back to my comment earlier. Vulnerability, when you choose to be vulnerable, it's going to bring healing to you. Vulnerability brings healing to me. Transparency brings healing to you. Tell your story. Tell it from your heart.
Boom, 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 boom. It's so, and I will use a quote that my wife likes to share. Michelle says, you are a part of my story, and now I'm a part of your story. And I'm just excited to see what the journey leads to. Obviously, your book is coming out in 2023, so there's going to be a grand book launch along with that and other opportunities as well. Joseph, so grateful for you and how you show up in the world. And thank you for your service. Oh, last thought. We have our Ultimate Speaker Competition Military Veterans Edition coming up in July 2023 in Washington, D.C., which I believe you will be a big part of. I'm not in the military. My son served, but we are so excited about this because our veterans also have stories. And I think that that's a group of people that it's not maybe the norm for them to think, oh, yeah, I'm going to go write a book, or I'm going to go tell my story. So we really are excited about creating this platform. I know you said your last word, but any thoughts about that? Because you being a veteran, just kind of speak to that idea that we're going to be doing.
No, Christoff, I think it's an amazing thing that you're going to do for the veterans. Just in reference to them, there's so much transition that happens in their life. And, I came and went from a time that transitioning out of the Marine Corps just to go from one job to the next was extremely hard. And that was prior to combat, and then even during combat when those things were happening. But during that 2003 to 2011, 12 timeframe, and even further on, the war on Iraq and Afghanistan, these guys weren't just transitioning from another job. They were transitioning from seeing death. They were transitioning from seeing life taken. They were transitioning from such a hardship as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old, now going into civilian life, dealing with PTSD, brain traumas, that ultimately it kind of goes back to Vietnam. America was not ready for that. And they didn't know how to handle it. And again, it caught us off guard that Americans, spouses, loved ones were not ready for 20-year-old Johnny to come back to his family now being different, or 23-year-old Sam coming back to his wife and kids and her having no idea how to cope or deal with somebody that had PTSD, so hearing about the opportunity for other veterans to share their story and how they've been able to overcome or are overcoming what they've gone through in life. I call it the hell in the hallway. To hear that, it's going to be really exciting to be at and be a part of.
It is indeed. Thank you so much, Joseph. Now I'm going crazy on my my dashboard. Joseph James, my friend, so grateful to have you here today on It's Your Time to Shine. And you indeed do shine, my friend. The world is a better place because you are in it and because you serve and share your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christoff. Such an honor and a pleasure to be here.
Cheers.